Your kingdom spouse may be distant right now. But before you call it rejection, pause. What looks like a closed door may be the outward sign of a battle you cannot see. And there is one clue that can help you tell the difference between someone who has truly dismissed you and someone who is struggling under pressure. Stay with me, because we will return to that clue. Right now, his silence may feel louder than any explanation. Messages have changed, warmth has faded. The connection that once felt clear now feels uncertain. You may be asking, was any of it real? Did he choose someone else? Did I imagine the whole thing? But listen carefully. Distance does not always mean absence of care. Sometimes a person withdraws because shame has taken over. Sometimes fear tells him he is not ready, not worthy, or not strong enough to carry what love requires. Sometimes responsibility, past wounds, spiritual confusion, or private pressure pushes him into isolation. That does not excuse dishonesty, disrespect, manipulation, or emotional neglect. A hidden battle is not a permission slip for harmful behavior. You still need wisdom. You still need boundaries. You still need truth. The Queen of Pentacles appears here reversed, not as fortune-telling, but as a mirror. Upright, she represents stability, nurture, and grounded love. Reversed, she can symbolize what happens when care turns into overgiving, when patience becomes self-abandonment, and when someone pours so much energy into another person that they lose their own peace. That may be the warning in this moment. Do not let his battle become your identity. You may be tempted to chase answers, send another message, or prove that you are worth choosing. But your value is not measured by someone else's ability to recognize it while they are struggling. Ephesians 6:12 reminds us that we wrestle not against flesh and blood. This does not mean every relationship problem is spiritual warfare. It means you must be careful not to make the person the enemy before you understand the pattern. Because the real question is not simply, is he distant? The real question is, what kind of fruit is this distance producing? Your discernment begins where anxious assumptions finally end and truth starts. And in the next part, we are going to uncover why that fruit matters more than his silence, and how to protect your heart without reacting from fear. Because silence can hide many things, but fruit eventually reveals what silence is protecting. Watch the pattern. When someone is genuinely struggling, his distance may still carry signs of conscience. He may not know how to explain what is happening, but he does not deliberately humiliate you. He may retreat, but he does not need to distort the truth to justify his retreat. Even when he feels overwhelmed, there may still be restraint, respect, or an awareness that his choices have affected you. That does not make the silence easy. It does make the pattern different. Avoidance without accountability produces another kind of fruit. It leaves you questioning your memory. It shifts blame onto you for asking reasonable questions. It offers warmth one day and coldness the next, then expects you to accept the confusion without explanation. Instead of bringing clarity over time, it creates greater emotional instability. This is where discernment becomes necessary. The Nine of Cups appears here, not as fortune-telling, but as a symbol of emotional desire and personal satisfaction. It can reflect the longing to finally receive what your heart has been asking for. But it can also ask a difficult question. Are you looking at what is truly being offered, or at the outcome you desperately want this connection to become? The image is full of cups, yet the real issue is not how much emotion exists. It is whether that emotion can hold truth. You can feel deeply for someone and still recognize that feelings alone do not create a healthy relationship. He can care and still be unprepared. He can miss you and still avoid responsibility. He can believe the connection matters and still choose patterns that make closeness unsafe. So here is the first layer of the clue I promised you. Do not measure his intentions by how intensely he pursued you in the beginning. Do not measure them by the words he spoke when everything felt easy. Look for whether truth and responsibility remain present beneath the distance. Does he eventually acknowledge what happened? Does he show humility rather than defensiveness? Does he respect your boundaries even when they limit his access to you? Matthew 7:16 teaches that people are recognized by their fruit. That principle does not require you to read his mind. It asks you to observe what his choices repeatedly produce. Hope does not mean ignoring the evidence, and wisdom does not mean assuming the worst. It means allowing the pattern to speak before your fear writes the conclusion. Because in the next part, we need to uncover the difference between a man who is fighting for healing in private and a man who is only keeping you emotionally available while refusing to choose responsibility. A man who is truly struggling may not communicate well. He may become quiet, awkward, or inconsistent because he does not yet know how to name what is happening inside him. But there is a difference between being unable to offer clarity and repeatedly offering just enough attention to keep you waiting. Listen carefully. Breadcrumbing does not always look cruel. Sometimes it looks tender. A late-night message, a familiar nickname, a sudden confession that he misses you, a brief return to the warmth you once shared, and then silence again. No direction, no accountability, no honest conversation about what changed. The contact gives you relief, but it does not give you security. It raises your hope, but it does not move the connection toward truth. So ask yourself, when he reaches out, does the relationship become clearer, or does the same cycle simply begin again? A person fighting a private battle may still feel fear. He may hesitate. He may even pull away when the conversation becomes uncomfortable. But over time, sincere struggle should create some movement toward honesty. Emotional breadcrumbing creates movement only toward continued access. That distinction matters. The Nine of Swords appears here reversed, not as fortune-telling, but as a picture of what happens when private fear can no longer remain hidden. Upright, this card often mirrors anxiety, sleeplessness, guilt, and thoughts that become heavier in isolation. Reversed, it can represent the moment someone either begins facing that inner pressure or keeps trying to escape it without changing anything. You cannot make that decision for him, and you should not interpret every return as proof that he has made it. The reversed Queen of Pentacles still carries its warning. When you are hungry for reassurance, a small gesture can feel sacred. A vague message can feel like confirmation. A temporary opening can feel like evidence that you are supposed to keep waiting. But spiritual language can become a hiding place for attachment when it teaches you to ignore what the pattern is doing to your peace. Preserving your peace is not abandoning him. It is refusing to abandon yourself. You can have compassion for what he may be carrying without allowing his uncertainty to govern your emotional life. You can pray for his healing without becoming the place where he avoids responsibility. You can leave room for truth without leaving the door permanently open to confusion. Because the strongest evidence of a genuine battle may not be how often he returns to you. It may be what he finally becomes willing to confront within himself. What he confronts within himself may be far more uncomfortable than the distance allows you to see. Sometimes love does not only offer comfort, it exposes responsibility. And responsibility can awaken fear. Fear can uncover wounds, and wounds can drive a person into isolation. A man may withdraw not because the connection means nothing, but because it reveals the gap between who he is and who he believes he would need to become in order to carry it well. He may feel the weight of unfinished healing, financial pressure, family expectations, past failure, grief he never processed, promises he made to himself and did not keep. He may look at the love being offered and immediately think about every way he could disappoint it. That is not the same as readiness, and it is not proof that he will change. The Knight of Wands appears here reversed, not as fortune-telling but as a symbol of energy without direction. Upright. This knight moves with courage, passion, and momentum. Reversed, that same fire can become restlessness, inconsistency, impulsive movement, or the desire to escape before commitment requires endurance. He may feel strongly and still run. He may want closeness and still resist what closeness asks of him. He may imagine a future with you, while continuing to live from an identity that cannot sustain it. This is why chemistry cannot be the only evidence you trust. Intensity may reveal desire, but character reveals capacity. Listen carefully. His battle may not be between you and another person. It may be between the man he has learned to survive as and the man he knows he must become. One identity avoids difficult conversations. The other accepts accountability. One seeks relief. The other chooses growth. One returns when loneliness becomes uncomfortable. The other returns only when he is prepared to bring truth with him. You may have compassion for that conflict. You may recognize that becoming someone new can be frightening. But you cannot complete that transformation on his behalf. You cannot love him into courage. You cannot explain him into maturity. And you cannot keep imagining progress where his choices show no movement. An inward battle eventually leaves outward evidence. Not perfection. Not sudden certainty, but evidence. A willingness to face what he once avoided. A change in how he speaks. A greater respect for what his silence cost you. A decision that remains steady after the emotional moment has passed. Because transformation is not proven by what he says he feels. It is revealed by what he becomes willing to do. And this is where the tension deepens. What happens when his fear of losing you becomes weaker than his fear of being truly known? Then the connection has reached a crossroads. Because identity change eventually requires a decision. He must decide whether being known is worth the discomfort of telling the truth. Whether he will face the parts of himself that fear has protected. Whether he will move beyond intention and accept the responsibility that real connection demands. But he is not the only one being tested. His test may be courage. Yours may be restraint. His test may be honesty. Yours may be discernment. His test may be whether he can stop running from what love reveals. Yours may be whether you can stop chasing what love has not yet made safe. The Justice card appears here, not as fortune-telling, but as a mirror of balance, truth, and consequence. The scales ask whether both people are carrying their part. The sword represents clarity that may feel uncomfortable, but cuts through the stories fear creates. And the question is simple. Has this connection become balanced? Or have you been carrying the emotional weight for both of you? A kingdom connection should not require one person to pray, explain, forgive, initiate, wait, and hold everything together while the other remains protected from responsibility. Compassion may make room for struggle. It should not remove consequence. Listen carefully. Silence can become an idol when you spend more time interpreting it than listening to what your own life is showing you. You may examine every memory, every song, every dream, every shift in his energy. You may keep asking what his distance means while ignoring what your exhaustion means. That is where waiting can quietly become self-abandonment. Proverbs 4:23 tells us to guard the heart, because everything we do flows from it. Guarding your heart does not mean becoming cold. It means refusing to let uncertainty take authority over your peace. There is a difference between waiting with God and waiting on a person who has offered no truth. Waiting with God can still contain movement. You continue living. You continue growing. You remain open. But you do not remain suspended. Waiting on someone can become a life built around their next message. Justice brings the focus back to what is real, not what you hope he is thinking, not what you fear he has chosen. What is he showing, and what are you becoming while you wait? Because his distance may be uncovering something in you too, something you could not see while the connection still felt secure. What you may be becoming is someone who mistakes uncertainty for an assignment, When he pulls away, you work harder. You pray longer. You explain more. You become more available. You search for the right words, the right timing, the right sign that will finally make the connection feel safe again. But listen carefully. Love should not require you to manage another person's readiness. The reversed Queen of Pentacles warned about this earlier. Care can become control when you believe your patience can prevent the outcome you fear. Understanding can become overfunctioning when you keep carrying what belongs to him. And spiritual hope can become self-neglect when your entire life begins waiting for someone else to choose maturity. Ask yourself gently, are you protecting this connection at the expense of your peace? Are you interpreting every coincidence as confirmation because the alternative feels too painful? Are you calling anxiety discernment because admitting that you feel abandoned would make you feel vulnerable? This is not an attack on your faith. It is not a dismissal of intuition, and it does not mean the love was imagined. It means your heart may be responding not only to who he is, but to an older fear of being left without explanation. The Wheel of Fortune appears here, not as fortune-telling, but as a symbol of cycles, change, and the limits of control. The wheel keeps turning whether you grip it tightly or release your hands. Some patterns repeat because they have never been recognized. The names change. The circumstances change. But the same fear keeps asking you to prove that you are worth staying for. Pause there. You do not have to earn permanence by tolerating uncertainty. You do not have to become more useful, more patient, or more spiritually understanding to deserve honest love. And sometimes the healthiest response to his battle is to stop interrupting the consequences that could awaken him. If you always soften the silence, he may never have to feel what his avoidance costs. If you always reopen the door, he may never have to decide whether he is prepared to walk through it with truth. That is not punishment. It is reality. You are not responsible for making his lesson easier by making your own life harder. The wheel begins to change when you stop repeating your part in the cycle. When you stop chasing clarity from someone who must choose to offer it. When you allow your peace to become more important than temporary reassurance. But what does that actually look like when you still love him? How do you stop chasing without becoming cold, manipulative, or dishonest about what your heart still feels? You stop chasing by allowing care and pursuit to become two different things. You can care without forcing a conversation. You can love without manufacturing closeness. You can remain open without repeatedly offering access where responsibility is absent. Not chasing is not punishment. It is not silence designed to make him panic. It is not a strategy meant to make him miss you, fear losing you, or return on your terms. That would still make your peace dependent on his reaction. Listen carefully. Not chasing means you stop trying to create movement that only he can choose. You do not analyze every post, every song, every change in his activity, searching for hidden messages. You do not send another explanation because the last one did not produce the answer you hoped for. You do not keep reopening conversations that return you to the same uncertainty. The Lovers appears here reversed, not as fortune-telling, but as a mirror of misalignment. Upright, this card can symbolize union, shared values, and a conscious choice. Reversed, it can reveal what happens when feelings exist but choices do not agree with them. The connection may be emotionally powerful, yet divided by fear, avoidance, conflicting values, or an unwillingness to choose with clarity. And that is important. Love can be present while alignment is absent. Desire can be real while readiness is not. You are not closing your heart. You are closing the door to confusion. That means telling yourself the truth about what is happening today, not only what you believe could happen later. It means maintaining the boundary after the loneliness arrives. It means returning your attention to your work, your health, your relationships, your purpose, and the parts of your life that uncertainty pushed into the background. You allow silence to reveal character instead of rushing to fill it. You remain open to evidence, but you stop building certainty from imagination. A genuine connection will not be destroyed by a healthy boundary. What may be disrupted is unhealthy access, the ability to receive your comfort, attention, and emotional availability without offering honesty in return. And when that access changes, something becomes exposed. He may finally feel the weight you have been carrying for him. He may have to face whether he wants the responsibility of real relationship or only the relief of knowing you are still there, but do not make his awakening your goal. Your goal is truth. Because when you stop carrying the connection alone, one of two truths will finally rise to the surface. The first truth is that his distance was part of a real internal battle. When easy access is removed, he may finally have to face what fear, shame, or passivity has cost him. Not only the possibility of losing you, but the deeper cost of remaining unchanged. If he returns from that place, the return should carry something different. More honesty, more responsibility, more willingness to name what happened instead of pretending the silence caused no harm. The second truth may be harder to accept. The connection may have survived only because you kept supplying the energy. You initiated, you understood. You forgave before accountability arrived. You kept hope alive when mutual readiness was absent. And when you stop carrying it, the bond may fade. Not because your love was weak, because your effort was holding together something he had not chosen to sustain. The Fool appears here, not as fortune-telling, but as a symbol of beginnings, risk, and the difference between courage and carelessness. Upright, this card can represent stepping forward without knowing every detail of the path. But a new beginning is not created by returning to the same cycle with a different promise. Listen carefully. A return is not the same as restoration. Does he bring clarity? Does he accept responsibility without making you prove your pain? Does he become consistent after the emotion of reunion begins to settle? Can he name what he was avoiding? Can he respect the boundaries that now protect your peace? Or does he simply appear with longing, regret, and familiar words, hoping the strength of the connection will allow him to bypass the work? An apology may be sincere and still be incomplete. Missing you may be real and still not produce maturity, and apologies without transformation can reopen the wound they claim to heal. This is why changed fruit matters more than renewed contact. Sometimes God's protection does not look like immediate reunion. Sometimes it looks like exposure. The pattern becomes visible. The imbalance can no longer hide beneath chemistry, spiritual language, or hope. You may discover that he is becoming willing to face himself. Or you may discover that the connection only moved when you pushed it. Either truth can protect you, because truth does not always preserve the outcome you wanted. It preserves you. But there is still one final test. One that matters even more than whether he returns, what he says, or how deeply he claims to have changed. The final test is what begins happening inside you when he stands at the door again. And when he stands there, your heart may recognize him before your discernment has time to examine what has changed. You may feel relief, excitement, the sudden return of hope. But longing is not the same as peace. Familiar chemistry can feel spiritual because it is intense. It can make the past seem smaller. It can make unanswered questions feel inconvenient. It can convince you that the strength of the emotion is evidence that the connection is finally safe. But listen carefully. Genuine restoration often feels different. It is slower, clearer, more humble. It does not pressure you to forget what happened simply because he has returned. It does not demand instant closeness as proof that you still love him. It creates room for truth, questions, boundaries, and the time required to rebuild what silence damaged. The Ace of Pentacles appears here, not as fortune-telling, but as a symbol of something real being placed into the hand. A beginning that can be built upon, an opportunity with weight, structure, and visible substance. Not another promise floating above the ground, something tangible. So when he returns, ask what his presence is actually producing inside you. Do you feel safe enough to speak honestly? Or do you immediately become afraid that one difficult question will make him disappear again? Can you remain grounded in your boundaries? Or do you feel an urgent need to give him full access before he changes his mind? Does he acknowledge the impact of his absence? Or does he ask you to focus only on how much he missed you? A changed man does not need your silence to protect his comfort. He can tolerate the truth. He can hear how his choices affected you without turning your pain into an accusation against him. He can rebuild trust without demanding that emotion replace evidence. Distance is not always rejection. Sometimes distance does reveal a battle, but only truth reveals whether that battle produced transformation. The Ace of Pentacles asks whether this return has a foundation. Is there consistency beneath the words? Is there responsibility beneath the emotion? Is there something both of you can build? Or only another powerful moment that will disappear when fear returns? Do not confuse the opening of a door with the building of a home. You are allowed to feel love and still move slowly. You are allowed to recognize the connection and still require safety. And you are allowed to receive new evidence without surrendering the wisdom the distance taught you. Because the final step is not controlling whether he stays. It is learning how to release the outcome without denying the love, the connection, or what you believe God may have shown you. Release begins when you stop asking your heart to control what only another person's choices can reveal. It does not mean the bond was meaningless. It does not mean you must force yourself to stop caring. And it does not mean reunion is impossible. It means you place the outcome outside your hands. You allow his actions to speak without translating every silence into hope or every return into destiny. You stop arranging your life around a decision he has not yet made. You return to the peace, purpose, relationships, and identity that existed before uncertainty became the center of your world. The Temperance card appears here reversed, not as fortune-telling, but as a mirror of imbalance. Upright, it reflects patience, integration, and the careful blending of what belongs together. Reversed, it can show what happens when one person keeps pouring while the other remains unable or unwilling to meet them in the middle. Too much waiting, too much explaining, too much of your peace being exchanged for temporary reassurance. Listen carefully. Release does not close the door on love. It closes the door on self-abandonment. You can examine the fruit without becoming bitter. You can refuse emotional crumbs without denying the moments that felt real. You can recognize that he may be battling something deep without carrying that battle as though it were your assignment. Let the boundary expose the truth. Let time reveal whether his struggle is moving him toward honesty or deeper into avoidance. And if he returns, require more than presence, require transformation. Because here is the complete clue we began with. Someone fighting a genuine internal battle may become distant. He may struggle to speak. He may hesitate, withdraw, or feel unworthy of what the connection requires. But over time, a real battle should move him toward truth and responsibility. Not deeper confusion, not repeated harm, not endless access without accountability. You do not need false certainty to move forward. You do not need to declare him your future or erase him from your heart today. You only need enough truth for the step in front of you. Trust what is consistent. Protect what is sacred within you. Allow God to work in places you cannot reach. Faith does not require you to ignore reality. Love does not require you to lose yourself. And God does not ask you to prove devotion by remaining trapped in confusion. His distance may not be rejection. But your peace is not meant to remain distant from you.